I'm Donna Scale.
And I'm Tiffany Ross.
Welcome to Roaring Lambs. Let me tell you what a roaring lamb is. A roaring lamb is someone who can take the hard, the difficult, the ugly parts of their life and use it to bring glory to God by showing others how He helped them through it. And that's exactly what our guest is going to do today. So let me ask you, what do you do with overwhelming pain from the past? How do you get over it? Well, stay tuned because you're going to learn how to do exactly that.
This episode of Roaring Lambs is brought to you by LifeStoriesCompany.com.
Elsa Christie Marley is a woman who is a mother, a wife, an entrepreneur, a speaker, a writer. She's a biblical counselor. She's a life coach. She's a mental health coach. She does it all. She stays extremely busy and helps others, and that's her heart. So she has a program called Revive 360 and Repurpose Your Pain, and you're going to learn a little bit more about Elsa and this amazing story. So welcome to Roaring Lambs, Elsa. We're glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, ladies. Thank you.
Yes, and so with a story, it's always best to start at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about your early years, your upbringing, your childhood.
Yeah, so I grew up in Cameroon in West Africa. I had a pretty lovely upbringing for the most part, right? People who saw our home and were around my family just knew that we were a very jovial and fun family to be around. We always had a lot of events and lots of major gatherings and everything. And so I grew up playing with a lot of other kids, had lots of cousins and uncles and aunts. And so we just did so many fun things. And I just always remember being outdoors with my cousins and going to the fish market with my mom and hanging out with my dad and just enjoying lots of Sundays at church because that was always a big deal. We'd be at church for 4 to 6 hours, and it was just a really, really fun childhood and upbringing.
Wow, I love that. And you know, just the fun and the laughter and the family and just good times. I'm sure good food.
Absolutely.
Right?
Let me tell you, Cameroonian food is absolutely delicious. It's the time that I actually get to use my hands to eat, and you know, it's the best ever. So I love food from back home.
Right? And so I'm just curious, what kind of a spiritual, you talked about church.
Yeah.
Was it kind of church attendance as many do, or you felt like it was really part of your lives?
It was
spiritual
a part
burning
of my life.
Yeah.
So my family, my dad's family was primarily Catholic, and so, but Catholicism in some parts of Africa, especially Cameroon, looks very different than here in the U.S. or in some European countries. It's very almost Pentecostal-like, okay? So there's very loud and vibrant music, everyone's dancing. I mean, it's Cameroon, right? And so I just remember us going to church almost every Sunday. My grandmother was very religious or spiritual, however you want to call it, and she was in love with the Lord, and so she always made sure that we were immersed in church culture. And so we went to church every Sunday, and I always had the opportunity to just experience worship and listen to the word and to be introduced to the gospel at a very young age.
And you even had a real encounter with the Lord when you were only 3 years old.
Yes, it's so crazy because whoever thinks that they can remember a memory so old, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, when you have an encounter with God, you really cannot change that. I don't care if it was right when you were born or when you're 1 year old, but God changes everything. And so I remember going to my grandmother's church with her one time, and I remember being dressed in this beautiful, what we call rapa. It's like you are dressed in like just adorned in colorful clothes and stuff. And that's how you dress at church. You have to always look really, really, you know, all to the T, right? And so I just remember the pastor preaching a message and feeling this strong connection to whoever this person that he was talking about. I just knew that whoever he was my friend. Jesus was my friend. And so I gave my life to the Lord at 3 years old, and I just felt like whoever this man is, this God, this friend, this person, this spirit, this is going to be my best friend forever. And that's how I understood him. Of course, later I'd get to know him more as father, but as a child, I just was like, I can tell you anything. you're with me, like, of course, like, let's be buddies, right? And so I developed a really, really close connection with the Lord at a very, very young age.
That is a very young age,
Yeah.
but like you said, when you have an encounter with God, you know it.
Absolutely.
And I know the rest of the story. So looking back on your life, it's really evident to me that God knew that you needed him, that you
Absolutely.
already knew him when you were about to encounter some harder things in life.
Absolutely.
So he made himself known to you, and you responded to him, and you had Jesus in your heart, even at age 3.
Absolutely, yeah. And I want to elaborate a little bit more on that. I think that sometimes, because God already knows our entire lives, right? He knows that what we're predestined to do. He intervenes in so many different ways, and we have the opportunity to essentially like come into the knowledge of who he is. And most of us don't choose to receive him. But thankfully I did, because had I not, there's no way I'd be here today even talking about the things that I talk about and sharing and being able to even love other people. But he knew what my story was going to be. He knew the attacks that were going to come. He knew what my entire destiny was about. And so he said, I'm going to step into a place, and if she invites me in, then I have the opportunity to do as I can with her. So, yeah.
And the first difficult thing that you faced was losing your mom, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Goodness, you know, it never gets easy talking about my mom. I'm in the process of writing my book, and I think it's been the hardest chapter. I call it numb, because I think that's the very first time where I just felt absolutely nothing. To know that this woman, her name is Esther in French, which is Esther, just the most vibrant, vivacious, like wildfire of a person, like spunky woman who just showed me nothing but joy. And she was so full of faith and hope and dreaminess. And was the one thing that kind of made me remember that life is a beautiful thing, right? If there is such a thing as someone imparting positivity in your life, my mom did that for me, right? And so when I found out that she passed away and I had to go to her funeral, it was the absolute most tragic thing, because it was completely unexpected for me. And I went to her funeral, and in most African countries, like, when someone dies, you spend your time really wailing. Like, it's not just we're crying a little bit, or do a little, sermon, and then we leave. Like, people literally mourn the dead in a very, in a way that as a young child, it was actually pretty scary for me, because I'd never experienced grief before, right? At least not in that way. And so here I am looking at this woman that was essentially my safe space, just laying on the ground, and people just crying. And I remember just completely becoming numb and going, like, what happened? What could have possibly gone wrong? And no one had answers for me, They were so busy grieving that they didn't realize that I was somewhere in the corner, like, completely losing all sense of emotion. And so that's been a very hard thing for me in my life, because, I mean, what little girl does not want to grow up with their mother, right? Yeah. Just that ability to be able to do fun things and get dressed and all the things, I just never got that. And so the little memory that I do have of her, I cherish and I hold very, very deeply. Yeah.
So I am curious, how old were you when this happened?
I was about 8.5, 9 years old.
Oh my goodness. That's heartbreaking, because children, boys and girls, but especially girls, that need their moms, want their moms.
Yes.
And like you said, your mom was your safe space. She was your safety net. And so now here you are dealing with the sudden death of your mom, and you're left with your dad.
Right.
What was that time like after her passing?
The word suddenly is all that keeps coming to mind. Everything just happened so quickly. My mom passed away, then I was being moved to go stay with my dad, and then we were moving to Japan, and everything just happened so fast. Like, I just didn't get time to breathe or to grieve. I was just now with my dad and my stepmom and family. And it was very hard, because while my dad was always somewhat present in my life, because we have a huge family, I was not necessarily the closest to my dad. I loved them because that's your dad, right? But my mom was really my safe space. So, yeah.
So your dad was not a safe place for you.
Mm-mm.
Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah. My dad, unfortunately, had some proclivities that are not very healthy. While he is one of the most intelligent people that you would ever meet, I mean, he scored like a 99.8 or something like that on the ASVAB. The man's pretty smart, you know. He has a spirit of perversion, and it wasn't until I got older that I started to have memories of what was going on, because I remember in my healing process going, I know someone was doing something to me, but I never knew who it was. And it's interesting that, not fast forwarding a little bit, but it's interesting how in your healing journey, sometimes God will preserve some things for you so you can actually really catch up to that like emotional like state of being able to handle that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know who the person was. I just always knew that somebody was doing something to me. Of course, I'd later on find out that it was my dad, but my dad had a very bad temper. He would get very drunk and just do some things that were very inappropriate. He molested me from as early on as I can remember, and was very physically, psychologically, and emotionally abusive. And, you know, I was that daughter that did everything to try to please him, you know, because I was I'm a born again people pleaser. I was always trying to make sure that he was happy, because that's what happens sometimes in abuse dynamics, is that the victim is trying to make sure that the abuser is okay, that they're tamed, because if they're okay, then I don't get to get hurt anymore. And so that was most of my life, spending time trying to please my dad so that I wouldn't get hurt any longer. So, yeah.
And not only, as you mentioned, you know, your dad was in this perversion. Little did you know, I believe he said, you're going to go visit your uncle in America.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not your uncle.
No.
What happened, Elsa?
Goodness. So I try to explain this to people. One, perversion has no boundaries, right? We sometimes think if you are living a lavish life and things look seemingly well on the outside, that your life is good. No, like, yes, I had gone to boarding school in Australia. I was living in Japan. We were, you know, established family. But my father's perversion always took place before anything else, and his anger and issues and the demons that he faced kind of like always appeared before anything else mattered. And I remember me coming back from boarding school in Sydney, and my dad saying, we're gonna go to Cameroon for a little while. And while I was in Cameroon, unfortunately, that was the first time that I lost my virginity. I was raped by a man there. And I had no idea what all of that had to do with what was going to happen. But shortly after that, I experienced that rape. My father told me I was going to be coming to America, and I'm going to go live with one of our uncles. And as a child, you're like, you've seen all these movies, you've seen the Melrose Place, you've watched Disney movies, you've seen all the cool stuff. And I was just super excited because I'm going to be coming to America. Like, who doesn't want to go to America, right? And little did I know that it was not going to be what I actually saw in the movies. It's going to be completely different.
So you came to America. Mm-hmm. You settled where?
In Michigan.
In Michigan.
Ann Arbor, Michigan.
And you moved in with an uncle.
Yes.
Who turned out not to be an uncle.
Yeah.
And he abused you as well. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to the United States and I met this man who was apparently my uncle. Like, our family traits are very, very strong. Yes, I'm more of the like lighter skinned person because of my mom's family, but we have very strong family traits. And I was like, this man does not look anything related to us. My dad didn't come with us, with me to the U.S., and so I'm just essentially going by myself and meeting this uncle, and I just always had this uneasiness with me being there. Of course, the minute that I got there, I really realized kind of why I was there. I didn't understand it to be what it is today, but I was quickly there to serve him, to make sure that his sexual needs were met, to make sure that his child that he had there was taken care of. There was a woman that was kind of in and out of the home. I didn't know if he was with her. She was another victim. I had no idea what was going on, but I was just there to take care of this man. And it was such a, double offense essentially, because I'd literally just been raped months before. And here I am now with this man who I'm being told is my uncle, but I'm like, no uncle would ever do this to you. Like, they would never make you sleep with them. They would never touch you this way. And here I am having to do these things to this man, and I'm barely a pubescent girl. And so it was a lot to deal with, and just a complete traumatization of my mind, And so, yeah.
So you talk, this is heartbreaking because you're 12?
Yeah.
Thrown into this, how scary. Traumatic doesn't even scratch the surface. And yet one day, the same friend that you met when you were 3, you could tell anything to, that same spirit within you told you to do one thing. What did he tell you to do?
To run.
To run.
Yeah, one of the things that he would always tell me is, don't leave the house. I'm gonna hurt you. All these different things, of course, that abusers say to make sure that you stay and they don't get discovered. But, and so I knew to stay at home, but I just heard this voice, and I'd known the voice of God at a very young age, and I knew that when I heard it, I had to obey it. And so when I heard that I needed to run, that's what I did. The minute I got to that door, I ran. A police officer saw me in the middle of the road, and I had an accent, obviously, because French is my first language. I could speak English, but not really very, very well without an accent. So he's like, what's going on here? It looks very peculiar. And so the officer ends up picking me up, and I end up being put in the foster care system. So obviously they realized what had happened or in the home, and I don't even remember the extent of that investigation, but I just end up in the foster care system immediately after that.
Now, this story does have a happy ending, and you would think it would happen now, but not yet.
No.
Foster care system wasn't very good for you, was it?
No, absolutely not. And I wish it would have been, because I would have been able to see the redemption of God a lot sooner. And the things that would have happened later on would not have really happened, right? But I got put in the foster care system in Ypsilanti, and the foster home, very first one that I was in, one of the foster brothers was a felon, so he was not allowed in the home, but his mom obviously was kind of trying to help him out and stuff, and he came and stayed in the home one night, and he raped me and the other girl. So we had to go to court and deal with all of that, and then I got moved around and given back to my dad, and I ended up in 13 homes over the course of 4.5, 5 years.
Wow.
One of them also being a psychiatric ward, because I tried to commit suicide, and I just wanted to I just needed to get out of this life. And unfortunately, only one of the 13 homes that I was in was actually healthy. One home. Yeah.
And I would love to say that that is the exception in the foster care system, but sadly it is not.
It's not.
We hear story after story. What is that?
I don't know. It's a demonic spirit, and the only thing I can think of is just a spirit of perversion. And perversion does not just look like sexuality. It just looks like changing what God meant to be pure into something that is unclean, right? And so you have these children who are broken and that are needing family, that are needing people to love them and care for them. And they are coming innocent and pure before you. And a perverse mind just twists that. They use them. We had a foster mom and dad who they were swingers. They'd make me and the other little boy, the little boy was maybe 6 years old, watch what they were doing, I had a home where we got held at gunpoint and we had to get transported immediately. you know, just so much craziness was happening. And a lot of these foster parents were okay with getting the money from the system to pay their bills, but to actually say that they loved these children, absolutely not. To the rest of the world, it looked really good. I had a foster mom who, she had a beautiful pool, all the great things or whatever, but she only let us use those things when like CPS would be coming around that week or something. But the rest of the time, cabinets were locked up. We never had access to food. She had to give everything to us. We never played in the pool, but she'd have us splash around and play on the day that CPS was going to be there. And we'd have to be like, yes, everything's great, and pretend. And it was just this act that was so disgusting. And I remember thinking, how do they do this? Like, it just did not make sense, the level of evil and perversion of the heart that it takes for a human to take in innocent, already broken children and then abuse them some more. Like that's a different level of craziness.
And there are a lot of wonderful foster parents
absolutely.
as well, but unfortunately in your case, you just 13 different homes in 4 years. That's amazing. And then to not have good experiences, I'm just really sorry that that happened to you, because I know that there are wonderful foster
I did
parents.
have an amazing foster parent, and she and I are actually still friends till this day.
That's
I mean,
great.
she impacted my entire life because I was like, oh my gosh, there's actually hope out here, you know? Such a sweet one. She was a single, widowed woman and just the most amazing person. And she literally took very good care of me and my foster sister. Yeah.
That's good. Now I know that I'm just imagining your life, and you were just searching for love after everybody who you want to love would turn on you and do evil things to you, and there had to be that need to be loved. And
Absolutely.
I know that you met a young man or a young boy and
Right.
started to become your boyfriend, and even he disappointed you.
Yeah. So, you know, whenever you go through the level of pain and trauma that someone like me has gone through, you start to wonder, am I even lovable, right? You start to ask yourself, are pieces of me just discardable? Is that why people are doing what they're doing? Am I worthy? And so I ended up, you know, I was running track and doing all these great things, working full time and preparing to, you know, just go run for a living or whatever and get scholarship money. And in the summer, I meet this amazing gentleman. He was like the only young guy who was folding clothes on a Friday night when everyone else is partying and drinking. And he was the very first person that I was finally open about my childhood trauma. And so my vulnerabilities were very much exposed to him because I'd never opened myself up that way. And we quickly, quote unquote, fell in love. He proposed to me within 6 months of us meeting each other. And we just knew that we were going to be together for the rest of our lives. I always wanted to be a young mom. I always would tell myself, I want to have 10 kids. And people were like, Elsa, you're a little bit crazy. What are you going to do with 10 kids? They're just so amazing because, of course, part of me wanted to redeem the innocence of children, right? And so I met him and we had such a wonderful romantic time. But at the end of the day, we both came from extremely traumatic backgrounds. And two people who've been traumatized, a victim and someone who unfortunately end up with more covert narcissistic traits, it just doesn't go very well, right? You end up in those trauma bonded relationships, which is what I was in. And so we would both go back and forth with each other, and there were things that he desired sexually that were re-traumatizing for me, right? I didn't think it's okay to watch porn. I didn't find it okay to be swinging. I didn't think all of these things, but part of you wants to please your partner. You want to make sure that they're happy. So you do all these things. And, you know, at the end of the day, I was like, this is such a toxic and unhealthy relationship. And as much as we both tried to make it work and even go get help, it was like, no, you're an unbeliever. We're both traumatized. You don't want to get help, and we're just not going to do this. And so I left from being victimized and traumatized and ending up in a place where I should have been with someone who loved me and helped essentially reverse the pain that I went through. And it just added on and piled onto it. Yeah.
And it ultimately ended in divorce.
Yes.
But you
Yeah.
have a beautiful son.
I do.
Yes. How old is he now?
He is 11.
Oh
my
my
son
goodness.
is 5'3", and I'm 5'3 3/4. I'm like, you're 11 and you're what right now? Help me understand when I became this like mom for real, right? So
So, as Donna said, your story does have a happier
it
ending.
does, absolutely.
And just as powerful and real as that experience was when you were only 3 years old, you really had a divine encounter.
I did.
In the midst of that bottoming out, that pain, how did the Lord meet you there?
Ooh, like every time I think about my re-encounter with God, like it literally takes my breath away, because it was exactly what I needed, and it revived my entire life. I remember going through my divorce and just reminding myself, okay, so you're gonna do the single mom thing. Like, you've gotta work, you gotta go to school, you gotta take care of this baby, like all the things. But I was so depressed. I was so down on myself because I felt like I just failed at life in general. And I remember going to a women's conference, and I'm sitting all the way in the back because I was like, I don't want to be bothered by these people. Why am I even here? But all I knew was, God, I need you to meet me here. Like, I know that you're alive. I know that you're here. But what I need you to do is meet me here in this moment. And I had the most miraculous encounter with the Lord. I mean, worship is going, and every single thing turned completely pitch black. And I'm just like, okay, what's happening here? But it was not a pitch black that felt scary. It was this soothing, beautiful sense, and then just light appeared. And I could see the faces of God, not like actual faces, but if you hear the descriptions of the Bible of God, like the lion, the lamb, the shepherd, I could see the different faces of God. And I could tell you that for the very first time, I was literally touched by love. His spirit just, I felt what it meant to be truly loved and to be truly seen in that moment. And it's just been so life-changing that I literally have lived from an overflow of that. And I'm like, can I please go back to that moment when things get tough? So yeah, it's been wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, when you meet God face to face like that, you know that He's real. You know
Absolutely.
that He's never going to leave you. He'll be with you forever, and it is life-changing. And I just feel like right now you might have a word for someone
Right.
who's in that same situation, just ready to give up and just, not want to live anymore maybe. And maybe you could just talk straight to them and
Right.
give them a word of encouragement.
The first thing that just comes to mind is just reminding you that you will live and you will not die. I remember after 8 suicide attempts thinking, why has He not taken me out yet? And God just reminded me that I have a greater purpose for my life, that there's so much more that I was created to live for. And I just want to speak to you, whoever you are right now, that has experienced trauma after trauma, loss after loss, grief after grief, and you are at the bottom of the pit. I want you to remember that you were created for a purpose, that you are divinely loved, that God sees your pain, He honors your pain, and that He is going to meet you. Now, would you just allow yourself to be able to encounter His presence and to feel His goodness, even in the midst of the pain, and even if you're at the bottom of the pit? Just let Him, invite Him in to your space. That's what I would say to even myself.
That's great. That's really good. And I know that your whole life is about living out that advice that you just
Absolutely.
gave to them. Tell us a little bit about your organization, Repurpose Your Pain, your program, and Revive 360.
Yeah, so Repurpose Your Pain is what I help people do now, right? What I do is I help people find the silver lining to painful situations. Because too often when we experience painful moments, we just look at the pain. That's the lens and the veil through that we see life through. And I think that God is trying to remove the veil of pain for people to be able to see him face to face, and for people to be able to encounter him in a different way, and for people to be able to really even see themselves the way he sees them, right? And so pain just has a way of twisting up some beautiful life experiences and just not allowing us to see God. And so I help people retell and rewrite their stories in a way where they see themselves as victorious and not as these people that the enemy came and just took and did whatever he wanted with. That they were beautiful, magnificent creatures that were placed on this earth to partner and co-labor with God to do something divine. And the enemy saw them was so intimidated that he felt that he had to throw every single thing at them. And my goal is to help them to rise up, because when an enemy tries to attack you, he realizes that you're actually something of value, right? And so when you rise up, you get to attack back and you reclaim the ground and the areas that the enemy tried to take from you. So that's what I do through Purpose Your Pain. And through Revive 360 Foundation, it first started off as us just working in the streets of Dallas and Fort Worth and speaking to women who had been trafficked and prostitutes, and serving them meals and just kind of hanging out with the homeless, to the Lord refocused my vision for it to be about missions and mental health, essentially training and equipping nonprofit organizations in the U.S. and across the world on how to provide psychological first aid to trauma survivors and those who've gone through sexual exploitation. Because one of the things that happened with me is that, yes, I am a person who is able to mask their pain pretty well. Most people, if I'm going through a really depressive episode, they would have no idea, because I know what it's like to show up at life and act as if nothing is going on. I had to play that role for a very long time. And so my goal is to be able to help people deal more with the mental health issues that trauma survivors face, because you might give them a home, you might give them money, you might give them whatever, but if you don't hit their mind, they will live tormented forever and are more likely to repeat some of the same cycles of abuse in their livelihood. So, yeah.
And it starts with inviting Jesus Christ into your life as Lord and Savior. If you're trying to do this on your own, you'll never get it done. If you're trying to muster up from within you that with which you need to deal with life, there'll never be enough. You need Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And just like Elsa said, he wants to come into your life. You know, he promises to make us a new creation.
Absolutely.
To start, give us a fresh start. And it's never too late to have a fresh start in life with Jesus Christ. So wherever you are spiritually, maybe you want to have that relationship, but you just don't know how. Just bow your head. In your own words, say, Jesus, I want you to come into my life. I want to experience you. I want you to make me a new creation. I want you to wash clean all the bad things in my life that I've done or said or thought, and renew me, Lord. Make me new. And I give you my life to make it better than I could ever make it. And if you utter words like that in any way, shape, or form, that's a prayer that God would love to answer, and he'll come into your life and do that. And I'm sure you might want to reach out to Elsa, maybe get some biblical counseling or just some mental health coaching. You can do that by going to her website, elsachristie.com. That's Elsa Christie with an IE at the end, .com. Reach out to her and let her know that her story made a difference in your life. And Tiffany and I would love to hear from you as well. You can reach us at info@roaringlambs.org. So I don't know what you've been through in your life, but take your story and use it to minister to somebody else, and that makes you a roaring lamb.
At Life Stories Company, our passion is to preserve your story in a personal memoir. These beautiful books can be shared with both friends and family for generations. For the past 28 years, we have helped over 200 clients share their history and wisdom. As a Christian, what better testimony than to share how God has led you and provided for you? Visit us at lifestoriescompany.com. Sharing your story and honoring God, lifestoriescompany.com.